Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from August 2nd, 2024, and recording this a little earlier in the week on Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. As always, I'm giving you guys that information so you know when this information is most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. Also, as always, we're talking about the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. I've been using those two lists now for over 6 years to do this video to see what was hot in the market 6 months ago, how they're performing 6 months later, should you have bought in, should you have been patient, and what factors affected whether or not you should have bought in or been patient. So that's what this video is all about. Most of you know that because you've been here for a while, and I appreciate that. So this week we got 17, 18 books to talk about. Let's dig in and see what we can learn this week. First up, we have No One, number one. This was announced that there was going to be a movie to sort of finish this story. Apparently, this was kind of a murder mystery, and one of the big questions through the whole thing was, who is No One? I guess you didn't actually find out during the series, but supposedly now there's a movie coming that's going to tie this up that's called I Am No One. So that is what was causing this book to hit list. It's only basically a $4 book at this point, at least. 9.8 going for right at 100. So now it's a $48 book, but a 9.8 only went for 20. We'll still call it like down, and I'll be back because you're literally talking about one 9.8 sale on that 20. Everything else, there's been several raw sales, and they're still in that kind of same range. I mean, you want to call that a dumpster fire or whatever, but it's hard to judge on one 9.8 sale. But not a lot of current love or interest in this particular thing. We'll see what happens when the movie, if it ever happens. Next, we have Berserker, number one. This is the Keanu Reeves comic book, and they basically were talking about the fact that they were already working on 2 seasons of an animated show. Like when this first comic got first announced, they said there was going to be an animated show and live action movie. Supposedly 2 seasons of the animated show are basically in the can and ready to come out, is what the news was. But this was still only going for $6. Now it's still a $3 to $6 book. 9.8 will cost you right around 50, with 45 to 55 right now. This was a very high print book. A lot of people knew about this. A lot of people ordered it. There's a lot of variants. That's one of the reasons this continues to be pretty cheap. We will see if and I also think the comic didn't quite live up to what everybody was hoping. So we'll see once the animated series comes out if they get some life here. But for now, this is just a cheap book. You shouldn't be paying more than cover price. Next, we have, for the second week in a row, we're going to move into covers, and we have Zatanna, Bring Down the House, number 2, the Jenny Frison 1 in 25 Virgin variant. DC's went to the under Virgin variant, still putting the little DC logo down in the corner, just not having the big title across the book. At this point, it was still a $30 to $50 book. Last week when we talked about it, it was actually a $40 to $50 book. So it was not quite getting the double ratio then. By this point, it was even less likely to get the double ratio. Now it's a $25 to $40 book. So down in all $25 to $40 book. Down, and I'll be back on this one. No recent 9.8 sales. I love this cover. This might be a time for me to actually see if I can steal a copy for pretty cheap. I got the regular trade dress, but I didn't get the Virgin. If I can pay basically, very cheap, then I might have to get one. Next, we have Deadpool number 31, the first appearance of Ellie Camacho, Deadpool's daughter, and this was hitting the list. This is Comic Buzz, so we only had one cover this week, but this is Comic Buzz, and this was because she was basically going to become Deadpool, which I think she sort of did, but he didn't really stop. I'm not 100% sure exactly how this storyline went, but that was why it was hitting the list. $15 to $30 raw. 9.8 was going for $175. Now it's a $5 to $25 book raw. Most of the sales like 10 to 15. 9.8, just 2 recent sales, a $105 and a $230 sale. So overall, we're going to call this down, and I'll be back focusing just on that raw side. Definitely just taking a step back. 9.8, just 2 sales, so it's a little all over the place, but I don't know that I would invest real high in this particular book. All right, with that, everything else is MCU related because of announcements that came out of SDC, San Diego Comic-Con. First up, or the release of Deadpool Wolverine. So there was those two factors. This is the reason everything else on this list is Marvel related. First up, we got Uncanny X-Men number 251. Second week in a row here. There was an Easter egg that kind of like of this cover in the movie, which is why it was hitting the list back then. $20 to $100 for raw copies back then. 9.8 hitting 200. Now it's a $15 to $60 book raw. The raws have taken a bit of a step back, but the 9.8s are still kind of up at $250 to $260, so still up from where it was when we talked about last week. So overall, we're going to call. I debated on whether to call this up and worth it or steady and worth it. 9.8s are definitely up. Raw copies are kind of down, and I'll be back. So, all right, next we have Gambit number 1. This is for the first Gambit solo series, and this obviously because we got a Channing Tatum Gambit in the movie. Raw copies back then were only go for $8 for this book. 9.8 $160. Now recent sales are $3 to $10 for raw copies. No recent 9.8 sales. I think most people, if they go after this book, go after the gold foil cover. But this is a steady, and I'll be back. It was a very cheap book. Still averaging right around $8. So no reason to chase it in the moment. There's a lot of these that you can find in back issue bins. Next, we have X-Men number 24. This Gambit and Rogue cover also hitting the list because of Gambit being in the movie. Raw copies were going for $15 back then. 9.8 $215. So this cover was actually going for higher than Gambit's first solo. And I think that's just because it also generally goes for higher than that. Raw copies now $5 to $15. 9.8 $170 to $200. So down, and I'll be back. You can definitely do a little better now than you could back then. All right, with that, we're going to move away from the Deadpool Wolverine stuff. So only 3 books for Deadpool Wolverine hitting the list. And we're going to go into stuff that came out of SDCC. And it was, first up, we have Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 1. This was hitting the list because the Russo brothers were basically talking about that they're going to be directing Secret Wars, and that their inspiration kind of was the original Secret Wars run, so that was why this was hitting the list. Raw copies $25, 9.8 $250. Not really that much different than what this book had traditionally gone for, maybe up just a little bit. Now $5 to $50 books for raw copy, with that 25 still being a very steady average. 9.8 $220 to $250. So we'll call it steady, and I'll be back. You can definitely find a little better deals, but pretty much the same price as it was back then. Classic storyline. They've been pushing it for the anniversary. We got a bunch of the facsimiles for all the Secret Wars issues. And yeah, this is kind of where they're going, supposedly more so than some of the more recent Secret War type stuff. Next, we have The Thing, number 1. Thing's first solo book. This was hitting the list because we got some images from Fantastic Four First Steps. And that was why people were kind of jumping on Thing. Raw copies, $15, 9.8, 112 to 175 back then. Now it's a $5 to $50 book raw, with a lot more sales in the like $25 to $40 range. 9.8, 125 to 270. So this is an up and worth it, borderline up and straight cash. With the movie coming out and everything else, it seems to have prompted some interest in this classic character's first solo book, and it is jumping up because of it. So, solo title book. I know he was in a lot of the like Marvel 2-in-1 and Marvel Team Up stuff before this, but next we do have a Marvel 2-in-1 book. We have the first. This is Marvel 2-in-1 number 64. First appearance of Sidewinder and the Serpent Society, and we basically got the reveal that Giancarlo Esposito was playing Sidewinder in the Captain America movie. Raw copies jumped up to a $40 to $80. 9.8 hits $275 based on this news. Now it's a $5 to $50 book with like a $50 sale, a $40 sale, and everything else under $30. So yeah, that's down in a dumpster fire. This book is not going for nearly what it was going for back then, even with the movie just about to come out, knowing he's in it. Next, we have Marvel Superheroes number 20, a classic Doom cover, and the rest of the list is related to the announcement that we got that RDJ was going to be Doom in the upcoming Marvel movies. So this is probably the only book that I agree with people should have speculated based on that announcement. We'll get into those books in a second, but this is, like I said, Marvel Superheroes number 20. classic Doom cover. Raw copies $200 to $600 back then. Now it's a $50 to $300 book. 8.5 goes for about $1,000. So that's actually still down in a dumpster fire just on the Raw side. As this book is taking a big step back, even though it's a classic 60s Doom cover, right at the end of the Silver Age. Next, we have Superior Iron Man #1, which is just an evil Tony Stark. Has nothing to do with Tony being Doom or any kind of thing there. It's just evil Tony Stark. So people were jumping on this, even though the announcement was very clear that he was playing Doom and like from a different timeline or multiverse. So yeah, but people jumped on Superior Iron Man for $20, 9.8, 100, or 90 to 100. Still way down from like some of the previous spec on this from like the Multiverse of Madness stuff when people thought Tom Cruise was going to show up. But yeah, now it's a $10 to $25 book, 60 to 70. So down and I'll be back. This is not anywhere close to what they announced. I don't know why people were specking on this, but that continues pretty much for the rest of the list. Next, we had What If Iron Man Demon in an Armor #1. And this book is basically Freaky Friday, where Tony and Dr. Doom switch bodies. Basically, that's the storyline here. Back then, people were jumping on this one for $120 to $200. Just a crazy value for this. Still going $50 to $125, with 9.8 going for $250 all the way up to $500. But still down in a trap on the Raw side compared to what it was. The vast majority of the sales are under $100. And people were paying $120 to $200 back then. But yeah, again, I don't really see this being the storyline, but okay. Next, we have Infamous Iron Man #1, and this is where Doom becomes Iron Man. So this is the opposite of what people are specking on. They're specking on Iron Man becoming Doom. In this case, basically Doom took over an Iron Man armor, kind of a superior Spider-Man type storyline, except they'd already done a Superior Iron Man, or they'd already done Superior Iron Man, so they called it Infamous. $50 to $100 back then. Now it's a $20 to $50 book. 9.8, 75 to 100. Another trap, and another book that didn't really make sense to spec on. But anything that tied Iron Man to Doom in any way, shape, or form, people were going after this announcement. Next, we have Iron Man 150. Iron Man versus Doom. Okay. That again doesn't appear to be what the storyline is, but people were jumping on this book. 50 to 125 back then. Now it's a $30 to $100 book. 9.6 on this will cost you $350. A classic Doom Iron Man cover, a book that's always had some value, but down and I'll be back. No reason to have chased based on that announcement. Getting a little closer, but still not what they're saying is going to happen, is Exiles #23 from 2003. And this is basically Tony becomes evil, or an evil version of Tony decides he's going to rule the world. He defeats Doom and takes his cape and starts wearing it. So kind of takes on the persona, even though he stays in his armor, doesn't really call himself Doom. He just has that cloak. 40 to 75 back then as people were chasing this. Now it's a $10 to $40 book, 9.8, 110, down in a trap. And we just keep going with this. We got two more. I'm kind of glad I didn't do a cash or trash this week, because I probably would have ranted for a very long time about why are people chasing these books. Next, we got Marvel Team Up #2. Basically, Doom shows up in this book to mess with Spider-Man. But we don't actually find out who's in it's just Doom as far as we know in this book, but it turns out that it's actually Tony Stark. We'll find out in the next book we'll talk about. But yeah, so Tony Stark is in the Doom armor in this. We just don't know it in this particular issue. Raw copies 40 to 70. Back then, now it's a $5 to $15 book. There was a 9.8 sale for $300. Only the one, definitely an outlier. Not sure what's going on there, but we're calling this down in a dumpster fire for a $40 to $70 book that's now a $5 to $15 book on a raw copy. And then we have Marvel Team Up #3 from 2005. And this is where we find out that the Doom that showed up in the last issue was actually Tony. And he basically ends up becoming Iron Maniac instead of Doom, but he's wearing Doom's armor. Anyway, raw copies $35 to $50 back then. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. Another dumpster fire. There was just a ton of overreaction to the announcement that RDJ was going to play Doom, and I don't mean overreaction in terms of excitement, in terms of chasing books that really didn't make sense with what they announced and what any potential storyline was going to be. And most of those books have been traps to dumpster fires and no reason to have chased. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.